Seems like to me if he's worthy, we ought to give him some. Come on, give him some praise. You don't have to think long to think of a reason to praise the Lord. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. St. John chapter 15. St. John chapter 15. The 15th chapter of St. John, you'll find these words. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing. 1 Corinthians 13, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, and have not love, I become a sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. Though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profited me nothing. Love suffereth long and is kind. Love envieth not. Love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, does not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Love never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. When that which is perfect is come, and that which is in part shall be done away with. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three. But the greatest of these is love. I want to talk about the legacy of love. The legacy of love. I will confess some intimidation by the passage because it's one I've preached many times before and one that you're familiar with. But I would that we go to the text afresh, see what it is the Lord wants to say to us. Jonathan Swift, who writes Gulliver's Travel, he talks about, and makes the statement that religion has taught us how to hate, but not how to love one another. We've gotten to a point where when we practice what we call love, we do more harm than good. Love is the essence of what God is all about. And many, as you heard me say before, think that this is a passage all to itself talking about love. But in essence, what Paul is doing, he's continuing his discussion with the Corinthians of what he's already shared in the previous chapters, especially in chapter 12. In chapter 12, he talks about the gifts of the Spirit and how they can contribute to any church membership and fellowship. But then he ends that chapter talking about a more excellent way. You remember 1 Corinthians is really not Paul's first letter. It's really Paul's second letter. He writes a letter to the church of Corinth after he established it. He established that church around 52 or 54 AD. He leaves, and sometime later he's in Ephesus when he writes the first letter. We don't know exactly what happens to that letter. It's lost. Subsequently, he makes a quick visit to Corinth to try to deal with some stuff that came up. They had written him questions that he tried to address in the first letter. The letter didn't have its kind of good effect. It was kind of received negatively. So he went over there in person, thinking that was going to help matters, and instead of matters getting better, they ended up getting worse. He's very distraught, and he makes some travels. He goes back to Ephesus. He ends up going to some other places. He comes back to Macedonia, we believe probably in Philippi. When he sends a letter by Titus, and Titus takes the letter to Corinth, he's trying to get an answer. We don't know what happened to that letter also. That's 2 letters lost. We only have the one, 1 Corinthians. And it's not until he goes to Philippi and meets up with Titus, because he couldn't wait for an answer from the second letter, from the third letter actually. And it's when he talks to Titus that he finds out God had kind of fixed that whole situation in Corinth. And that's what caused him to write what we call 2 Corinthians. I give you all of that because I want you to see the anguish that Paul has with dealing with the church at Corinth. He deals with this church who has all of these problems, and he talks about all of these divisions and this spiritual gifts that's causing this difficulty. And he says, well, instead of trying to pursue the gifts of the Spirit, you ought to pursue the fruit of the Spirit. That brings me to my first point. I want to talk about fruit. Fruits, fruit. Yeah, I know what I'm saying. Instead of talking about the gifts of the Spirit, you should be talking about the fruit of the Spirit. You remember in Galatians, he lists what he calls the gifts of the Spirit. And when he lists that list, you remember I told you the first one on the list is love. He talks about joy and peace. He talks about patience. He talks about long-suffering. He talks about a lot of things, temperance. He talks about a lot of things in that list, but when you really evaluate the list, you'll find that all of the other fruit that he listed are really a manifestation of love. That when he writes chapter 13, he only mentions the one fruit. He talks about love. Love makes sense to being the one, because you see, he says love is the most important thing you can pursue. He says love is essential. Love is preeminent. Love is at the top. Love is something you need to have. Are you going to pray with me? Well, look at you read, and you heard me read the text. He talks about a list of things. He talks about speaking in tongues. He talks about the gift of prophecy. He talks about the gift of faith. And you remember, faith is a fruit, but it's also a gift, as he mentioned. He talks about the gift of being able to give in terms of charitable giving. He gives a whole list, but he says none of those are worth a hill of beans if you don't have love. In other words, he says that the fruit of the Spirit is love, and love has its own fruit. Because you see, if you possess a gift and you don't have love, he says your gift becomes something other than what God intended to be in the first place. I wish I had a witness here. Oh yeah, you might have the gift of speaking in tongues, he said, but if you don't have love, you're nothing but just making a lot of noise. You can have of faith, he says that you can speak to a mountain and tell the mountain to get out of my way. He said that if you don't have love, he said you still don't have what it takes. You can have the gift of prophecy, and you can be able to foretell what's coming. You tell folk what God told you to tell them, but if you don't have love in your heart, he said you still don't know what prophecy is all about. He said you can give everything you have to a whole lot of poor folk, and they can brag on your charitable giving, but if you're not doing it in love, you're doing it just to be seen, you really don't do what God wants you to do. Charles Poole and I was in the car. We was on the way to the funeral home. The lady, Brenda's mom, the rest, and old Cliff had a tape in it by Bishop Jewel Newell. No, not Jay Newell. That's another guy. I want to say Jones. Yeah, that might be Jones. He's a bad boy. I didn't hear. But he was talking about pride and what pride is, and that's basically what this is all about. One of the commentators was saying that if you have a gift of God without the love of God, what you end up with is really pride. I brought up Brother Bishop Newell. Bishop Newell said, he says, what pride is, you have to define pride. Pride is really self-idolatry. I like that. Yeah. Pride is when you worship yourself. Pride is what the devil had when he was doing what he did to turn against God. And that's a lot of folk, that's a problem, a lot of folk in church. You confuse your gift of the Spirit to mean that you're close to God and have everything you want, when really all you're doing is you got a big pride party going on. Oh yeah. When you have a church and you brag on how good you can sing, but you don't have the love of God in your heart, that ain't nothing but pride. You know, so you try to brag about how well you can preach. If you don't have some love in your heart, you got a pride problem. You're a deacon. You got a position of authority and leadership, but you more excited about your power and the power you exert on other folk. And you see, you can't really function in God's program until you learn how to love everybody. Because see, we know how to love folk. We like to love the folk we want to love, but the mafia loves some people. The mafia takes care of their own. You got to learn how to not just love your clique, but you got to learn how to love everybody. You can't think that the world revolves around you, so when you don't feel good, we're not supposed to have good church. And when you stay home, you see, I came by to tell you that it's more important than just you. We didn't come here to worship you. We didn't come here to call on your name. We didn't come here to lift you up. I came here to lift Jesus. Because Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. That's what's wrong with too many folk. We're all into ourselves. We educated now. We got prestige. We got knowledge. We got all kinds of ability. Baby, if you got a PhD and you don't have the love of God, you ain't about a whole lot of nothing. You're all into how much you know, but God can just touch your head and you can be as crazy as a... You're all excited because you fine, you look good, and you got nerve to look down on somebody else who don't look quite so good. Maybe you can be the finest thing on the face of the earth, and God can just speak a word and you can be a pretty crazy person. You can go from good to ugly just like that. God can let you get caught in the fire. Your beauty is gone. God can let you get a disease, but they got to shoot you with some cortisone. And the next thing you know, your fine shape done blew up. Gone. You got to have more than all of the externals. You got to have more than stuff you just can see. You got to have some love in your heart. Yeah. If you're really about what God wants you to be about, he said you got to have some love. Paul said you need to seek the most important thing. Don't brag about what you can do. Brag about who you know. Don't brag about how you can talk. You ought to brag about how you walk. Don't brag about your gifts, but you ought to brag about your gifts giver. That's the sermon I'm through. Not only do I see the fruit's fruit, but I also see the fruit's face and the fruit's function. the fruits, face, and function. That love, I told you before, is something that you don't just talk about. Love is something you practice. Your love has an identity. Love does something, and when love does it, it does it well. When love meets somebody, it doesn't leave them in worship. When love leaves them in better shape. Do I have a witness here? And a lot of folk who talk about love and they start to say love, they can make it look like love, but you see, because it looks like love and smells like love and even acts like love, don't mean it's love. I wish I had a witness here. Oh yeah. Come here, Bouquet. Come here. Get up, Bouquet. Come on, Bouquet. I know you ain't moved fast in a long time. Move fast today. Come on. That looks a whole lot like love. See, I can hug on Bouquet, I can kiss on her as long as Jane don't get too mad. But you see, because I hug and kiss her don't necessarily mean I love her. I found out the devil likes to hug folk. The devil doesn't mind pretending to be loved. The devil don't mind pretending to be real. That's why you got a whole lot of relationships that's not really a relationship at all. You see, because folk go around hugging each other, kissing each other, don't mean they in love with each other. They got some folk who will smile and kiss you today and will stab you tonight. Oh, I wish I had a witness here. My boy Tom Cruise was so excited. He was jumping on Oprah's sofa, and now he has found himself split up. What happened? I ain't talking about Brother Cruise, and it doesn't just happen to him. It happens to a whole lot of folk. You might start out with something that looks like love. Start out with something that looks like the real thing. But when you get into the real deal, it just don't happen. So because it looks like love, don't mean it is love. But the thing is, Brother Hopkins, love looks like love too. Oh, I wish I had a witness here. He said, but the real test, the litmus test for love is that you can tell when it's the real deal by the way you feel. I tell my married couples, you can always tell when it's real. Because see, love doesn't ask, what am I going to get out of the marriage? Love says, I'm going to put all of me in the marriage. I want you to have a witness here. I'm going to put all of me in it because, well, who I'm marrying, I love them enough to think that they're going to put all of themselves in it too. Oh, help me somebody. Preacher, that might get me hurt. Yeah, you will get hurt if you're doing all the putting and you are not doing any of the getting. When I found out if you always empty yourself into somebody else and they're not putting the same amount back, pretty soon you're going to come up empty. And you can tell when you're in the wrong thing when you're empty. Oh, I think I ought to tell somebody. And you know what I found out? They got a whole lot of folk, Brother Green, who comes to church on Sunday morning who are empty. Oh, that's amazing. It's amazing. See, I just told you, love is when you pour in so much that you empty and you're not getting anything back. But there's no excuse for you being empty in church. You see, I found out because not being full at church ain't got nothing to do with whether or not y'all love me to pour in me. If the choir don't feel like singing, that still don't mean I got to be empty. If the deacons roll their eyes at me, that don't mean I got to be empty. If the ushers don't care too much for the pastor, that don't mean I have to be empty. If everybody got water instead of fire, that don't mean I'm going to be empty. Because you see, if you really want to be full, you ain't supposed to be full of that stuff no way. In fact, I came to tell you, some folk better off empty. Because you see, when you're really empty, you're not really empty. You're really empty of that which God wants to pour in. the gas is going to roll out on the ground. And when you get through, all you're going to have a tank full of water. Y'all ain't hear me? You can't fill up yourself full of hell and expect the Holy Ghost. Before you expect God to put something in, you got to do some emptying out. Sometimes maybe you ought to put a hole in your tank. You need to let some of that junk leak out. Because I found out the Holy Ghost has one of these qualities that not only will it fill up your tank, it'll fix your leaks. You need to let God have his way. But they, Lord, whatever is in me, if you're not pleased with it, take it out of me. We need to have an empty party. We need to get rid of some stuff. Some people are harboring some hatred and malice and strife. You ought to get rid of some of that mess. Some of y'all been holding on to mess for 20, 30, 40. You need to get rid of some of that mess. There's some stuff you've been holding on to, you got to get rid of. Some of y'all don't like preachers. It's not just me. You don't like no. You need to get rid of all that mess. Some folks don't like choir members. You got to get rid of that mess. Some folks think there's a wall between the brotherhood and the mission. You got to get rid of that mess. There's some folks who come just to dress. You think this is a style show. If you don't dress a certain way, you can't enjoy church. You got to get rid of some of that mess. God ain't worried about none of that junk. God says you got to come in with a clean heart. You got to come in with the right spirit. Look at David, pray, Lord, create in me a clean heart and renew in me the right spirit. So Paul said there's some things love does. You see the list. I can't go through all that. He said love is long suffering. Love is kind. Yeah, you can tell by the fruit what kind of tree you got. You can't expect to get, he says, bitter fruit from a fresh tree. If you got a bitter fountain, he says you got to have a bitter well. In other words, if I'm drinking out of a well and the water is poison, it's because the well is poison. You can't drink poison water and think it's going to be good. He said, don't listen, you get a pitcher of water and say, Lord, I want you to bless this poison water, and then drink it, think it's going to be all right. God said, you've been drinking from the wrong way. Love is not puffed up. Love is not concerned about itself. Love looks at the Lord. Oh, I wish y'all could see y'all faces right now. Jesus, when he was talking, he says, abide in me, and I in you. And if you abide in me and I in you, he said, you can produce many fruit. Oh, yeah. But he says, without me, you can do nothing. And he said, because you're producing fruit, don't think you all you ought to be. No. He said, when you're producing fruit, all that means is that the husbandman, Jesus talking, the gardener, that's God. He said, when you're producing fruit, Jesus talking, he says, I'm the vine, you're in me. He says, but when you're producing fruit, that means God, the gardener, has to do some more work on you. But he cuts off some stuff that ought not be there. He prunes you, and he takes that junk that you don't need to have, and when he gets through with you, you can produce even more and even better fruit. And my question is, how much fruit are you producing? That's the question I asked folk Wednesday night. How many fruit are you producing? You don't really have to argue with me about it. All you got to do is ask yourself, how many fruit are we producing? Now, you don't see you trying to lie on Bethany. But how much fruit do we have? I mean, remember me doing good. I don't think we're doing all that. Look at all the empty seats in the choir stand. And that tells me that we need to produce some better fruit. Well, look at some empty seats in the audience. I see empty seats in the balcony. They said, we're not doing something right. We need to do some greater fruit bearing. He says, something wrong with our fruit bearing. And he said, the only way you can't produce fruit is if you're not really abiding in the vine. I wish I had a witness here. Abide in me and I in you. And if you abide in me, you can produce many fruit. I wish I had a witness here. Preacher, you ain't doing all you need to do. Because if you're doing such a great job, why do we have all these empty seats that all of us got to share some blame if there's some empty seats? We all need to recognize that we got to increase on our fruit bearing. Now, do I have a witness here? Now, let me close. Y'all look at me like that. I don't know what I'm talking about. But let me close talking about the fruit's father. The fruit's father. The fruit's father. The fruit's father. I really battled with this thing because I didn't want to sound like my favorite sermon. Y'all know when I do that sermon on the preeminence of love at the top, the first 4 verses. And I said from verse 4 on down to verse 7, really, I talk about the practice of love. Love is something you practice, but when I close